Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. This is the weekend edition of The Bullet. Joining me this weekend, we have on my right and up first, Alex Ooley. You just saw him yesterday. He's, of course, the guy behind the Forge of Freedom podcast. He is an attorney, and he's in the southern portion of Indiana. And as I say every time Alex is on, this is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you know what to do. Go see an attorney in your area. Below Alex, we have Greg Hopkins, who is a recovering attorney. He is out of Alabama. He's also a former Justice of the Peace. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Okay. And he's also the author of the book, and I'll get it right up there in front of the camera, A Time to Kill, The Myth of Christian Pacifism. I have my own copy right here. You cannot have it, but I imagine if you go to Amazon, you can get Greg's book.
Yes, yes.
And below me is Rob Morse, and let me put Rob up on the screen here. Rob is Self-Defense Gun Stories. He helps me out with the Polite Society podcast. He has a fantastic blog, slowfacts.wordpress.com. And everybody picks up Rob's written stuff. If you read Second Amendment news on the internet, you probably have read his stuff. Let's go ahead, guys, and we got a lot of stuff to... Well, no, we got 3 topics, I think, that are going to take our whole hour. We got more we could talk about, but first up, we've got a story out of New Mexico. Governor Grisham out of New Mexico decided yesterday that, well, she's just going to suspend the Second Amendment in Albuquerque. She had a press conference yesterday. I'm going to run a little bit of a clip off that press conference. I got this off of Twitter, and then I'm going to we're going to have a press release from Stephanie Lord, who is a friend of mine and is a representative in New Mexico. But let's go ahead and get this clip out of the press conference first.
Yeah. But your point is that.
You took a vote for the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carry license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms. In this emergency, this 11-year-old and all these parents who have lost all these children, they deserve my attention to have the debate about whether or not in an emergency we can create a safer environment. Because what about their constitutional rights? I took an oath to uphold those too. And if we ignore this growing problem without being bold, I've said to every other New Mexican, your rights are subjugated to theirs. And they are not, in my view.
You said about crimes. There are laws against crimes, so how are they...
But again, if I'm unsafe, who's standing up for that? If this climate is so out of control, somebody should do something. I'm doing as much as I know to do. Yep.
Do you really think that criminals are going to do this message and not carry a gun in Albuquerque on the streets for 30 days?
No. But here's what I do think. It's a pretty resounding message.
All right, that's what I have of that video clip. And I'm going to start with this, and then we'll go around the horn here, and we'll get to Stephanie Lord's press release here in just a second. At the end of that clip, you heard her say, "No, I don't expect the criminals to comply with this." So she is admitting this is going to do no good, and this is all sound bites. And look, if she doesn't expect criminals to comply with this, how can she expect the regular citizen to comply with it. She's, ugh. And yes, there are theoretically limits on free speech. However, what happens is you are prosecuted after you speak. There is nothing that says I cannot go into a theater and open my mouth. And by God, if there is a fire in a crowded theater, I better be yelling fire. Greg, I'm with Alex all the time. I'm with Rob all the time. I don't get to talk to you on the air very often. Greg, I'm going to start with you. What do you think, man?
Well, this reminds me of when Louis the 14th made some all-encompassing order, and his premier said, "Well, what will the state say?" And he said, "The state? I am the state." No, this is a person who I don't know if New Mexico has a preemption law or not, but for a person to say, all right, this is an emergency. This is an emergency I just made up this minute. And in order to address this emergency, I'm going to ban people who legally carry guns and are presumably trained in order to use them. But I recognize that it's not going to affect the criminal element. Therefore, we're in the twilight zone here with this lady. Like most liberals, and Congress in general, someone says there's a problem. I says, all right, we have to do something. Well, have to do something generally turns into have to do anything, which is actually what we're going to talk about with the Safety Act that John Cornyn took through the Senate, and now Biden he's sending objection letters to Biden because Biden is using it wants to use it to ban all sales. You see, this is when we say we've got to do something. Well, then it generally means we'll do anything and we don't care. This has been the liberal mindset for generations. There's poor people in America. Oh, okay, let's expand welfare and put it on everybody. All right, and it keeps growing and it keeps growing, and nobody gets off of welfare. So this is the kind of absurdity that rests in the liberal mind. And the sad thing is that there's enough people that don't care, or people who are they're so loyal to the brand that their brains are turned off, and that this kind of stuff goes through. And in this case, it's not going to go anywhere, though. I'm sure you all have seen that the sheriff of the county has already said it's unconstitutional. He will not enforce it. If that chief of police sitting next to her had the slightest bit of guts, he would have said the same thing at the press conference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I noticed on screen right, on her left, there was the chief, I believe it was the Albuquerque chief of police. On screen left, on her right, I believe was her personal bodyguard. And I'm guessing both of those were heavily armed.
Yeah. If the left didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all.
All right. Rob, I'm going to go to you next, man. What's your thoughts on this whole
I think
debacle?
that's out of order because you've got two lawyers here. I'm just a political hack. This isn't an emergency in the regular sense. I've been around fires, I've been around floods, I've been around earthquakes. This press release is designed to distract the voters and the press from the catastrophically failing political policies that came out of Albuquerque. Politicians produced the catch and release laws. They released criminals back on the street. They destroyed the families that should have raised their young men and women. Feral children in our failed cities aren't a gun problem. They're a political and cultural problem. These politicians produced it, and now they're saying, look over there. Alex, what do you think?
Yes.
Well, I agree with both of you, and there are so many things to say about the governor's really trampling, stepping on the Constitution, and then more importantly, the rights, the individual rights of the citizens of New Mexico. And I think I looked up, I don't know a great deal about the law in New Mexico, but I looked up their Constitution, and it says, this is Section 6 of their Constitution. It's the section covering the right to bear arms. And it says, no law shall abridge the right of the citizen to keep and bear arms for security and defense, for lawful hunting and recreational use, and for other lawful purposes. And then further down it goes on to say, no municipality or county shall regulate in any way an incident of the right to keep and bear arms. And I think that's pretty clear here, and I don't see anything about in that constitutional section there about except in emergencies. I mean, imagine if she said, and I was talking to my father, Mike, who I think most of you know, except maybe Greg, prior to the show here. He said, imagine if she said we were going to suspend the Fourth Amendment and we could just search anybody's home for the next 30 days because it's an emergency. Nobody would stand for that. But for some reason, it's okay when it's the Second Amendment, or the right to keep and bear arms. And I hope that, like Greg mentioned, that the sheriff continues to take a stand in this regard and won't enforce this tyrannical measure that's being taken by the governor. And I hope that the people of New Mexico stand up and exercise their rights anyway, because what should be unlawful here is not the exercise of the right. It should be the governor's actions by trampling on the rights of individuals. If this were a true emergency, that's when individuals need their rights the most.
Amen. Let me do this. I've got this on a voiceover. It's a AI voiceover of Stephanie Lord's brain isn't working. Press release. And I'm also going to put on screen, while this is playing, I'm going to put on screen her tweet from earlier today. And let's go ahead and go with that.
New Mexico State Representative Stephanie Lord, our NM22, and John Block, our NM51, are calling for the impeachment of New Mexico's governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, after Grisham's emergency order that violates the constitutional rights of New Mexicans. On Friday, Governor Grisham issued an emergency order mandating the ban of all firearms, even concealed carry permit holders, to address rising crime in New Mexico's largest city, Albuquerque. This emergency order violates the governor's oath to protect and defend the rights of New Mexicans and is illegal in nature. The legislature has a duty to intervene when the government is overstepping its boundaries, and Governor Grisham's order and comments disqualify her from continuing her tenure as governor. I am calling on council to begin the impeachment process against Governor Grisham, said Representative Stephanie Lord. This is an abhorrent attempt at imposing a radical, progressive agenda on an unwilling populace. Rather than addressing crime at its core, Governor Grisham is restricting the rights of law-abiding gun owners. Even Grisham believes this emergency order won't prohibit criminals from carrying or using weapons, a basic admission that this will only put New Mexicans in danger as they won't be able to defend themselves from violent crime. I have a newsflash for the governor. The Second Amendment is an absolute right, and so is my authority to impeach you for violating your oath to New Mexico and the United States.
I love that last sentence in that press release. And I want to get a comment in here from George Geller. He says, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing the governor's not suspending the Second Amendment for her security detail. And we discussed that earlier. No, she is absolutely not doing that.
Do you guys remember when that atrocious anti-gun control bill was passed in Washington State? A bunch of people from Washington Carry stood in a huge array right in front of the Capitol. I think it was on grass, because I'm seeing the video play out. And I think a lot of them were some were carrying firearms, handguns, some were carrying rifles, unloaded, and they handed them to each other, traded guns, and handed them back, because the law outlawed transfer, not just sales. So it was a Bloomberg move to confuse possession with ownership. And they said, here, There are 500 people who just violated your law on video right in front of you. Come get us. I wonder if that sort of event will happen in Albuquerque.
Well, and let me go ahead and I'm going to briefly put this this tweet back on screen here because we're starting to get comments about impeachment. Representative Block and I have asked legal counsel to start the impeachment process for Governor LG for violating the oath of office by this is why I have AI read by mandating the ban of all firearms, even with concealed carry in Bernalillo County. However, when asked about a previous impeachment, the last House Speaker, Democrat Brian Egolf of Santa Fe, said, "No way, forget about it." But that doesn't matter. This is an uphill battle worth fighting over. So she's run up against roadblocks before. Speaking of Representative Lord, she's going forward with it again. I think this time she's going to get more traction. I don't know if it gets all the way through the House, which is heavily Democratic in New Mexico, but I think she gets a lot farther than she did last time.
Isn't the Speaker of the House a Republican in New Mexico?
I don't know. I could send a text, but it's going to take a while.
Oh, no. Okay, it's Martinez, a Democrat.
Let me get let me get a couple comments in here again, guys. First, from Warsaw Patriot, he says, all law enforcement is against this tyrannical and deranged governor. She needs to be fired for making comments like that. And George Geller says, the audio and the video of the governor was dubbed in. If you read her lips, she actually said, "I'm declaring an emergency because my policies don't work and I want to be reelected."
I love it.
Well, isn't that fascinating? So you pass Bloomberg's policies. You put in a Soros-funded prosecutor. You get catch and release. You get exploding crime, and by accident, the press covers it enough that you look stupid. So now you violate your state constitution. Ooh, that looks a little ugly all around. Democrats are now in a horrible position. They have to either say, yeah, there's no law, we're God, get out of our way, and say that in front of the voters, or they have to impeach their own governor. This is going to be fun to watch. By the way, who owns the popcorn concession?
I wish I had a piece of it. What I'd like to bring up here is there are two questions in that 1 minute and 49-second bit of the press conference that I was able to pick up from the press, and this was all of the press. There are two questions. One was, "This doesn't appear legal." The second one was, "Are the criminals going to follow this?" Sounds like the press is starting, at least in New Mexico, to move a little bit more towards our side.
Yeah, and of course, the governor knew the answer to that question and answered in the way that we all know is the correct answer. Of course, they're not going to comply. But she says, "What about the safety of these people?" You know, and like there's some constitutional right to safety, and that reminds me of a great quote. I'm sure you all know it. If I get it wrong, please correct me. But it's something like, "I prefer the tempestuous sea of liberty to the calm seas of despotism," and I think that was Thomas Jefferson. So she is going not only against the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of New Mexico, and the rights of the individual citizens in New Mexico, but she's going against the spirit of the founding of our country, and that was one that defaults to liberty rather than safety and tyranny.
One last thing, and we're going to have to move on. I want to link this, as almost every show I talk about the Bruin decision. And I want to link this to the Bruin decision. In the Bruin decision, Justice Thomas specifically wrote, "You cannot make all of Manhattan a gun-free zone." Governor Grisham needs to look over that, because she cannot make all of Albuquerque a gun-free zone.
Well, you have to
and she
understand
says,
that the progressive movement in America since it was founded in, say, 1880 roughly, their entire basis has been, we are smarter than those old men 100 years ago, and we can do better. And it has gone completely through our history. They disregard the Constitution. The Democrat Party is an anti-U.S. constitutional party. And so, when they say, oh, this is a court ruling, oh, that was a conservative guy, So that's just the fact, folks. If you are a Democrat, you are supporting the nullification of the United States Constitution.
I'm not as smart as Alex, I'm not as smart as these two lawyers, but I do remember Franklin. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, another great quote for sure. And of course, you mentioned Bruin, Paul. Her excuse here is, well, I can ignore the Constitution because it's an emergency. And there are variations of this, but it basically, the gist of it is that if you allow the government to violate the Constitution or break the law because of an emergency, they will always create an emergency to break the law or violate the Constitution. And that's exactly what's going on here. I think lots of politicians got the idea during the pandemic that, hey, if we just declare a state of emergency or an emergency of some kind, we can do whatever we want and whatever we think is best for everybody else, because like Greg said, we know better than the people do.
The last time that happened, folks, was 1933, December. Hitler was legally appointed Chancellor of Germany. In January of 34, the Reichstag, which was their capital building where their parliament met, was set on fire. And at that point, Hitler declared a civil emergency. And that was the last time from January 1934 until June of 1945 that the Germans had any civil rights.
You may recall that there were a number of states who modified their laws to say, no, at least the Second Amendment doesn't go away when the government declares an emergency. Now, I'll bet you that wouldn't pass in New Mexico because the Democrats went, oh, wait a minute. We won't let an emergency go to waste. We'll use it.
Many states, and Rob, you may have more insight into this than I do, but many states implemented laws or passed statutes that prevented basically the setting aside of the Constitution during emergencies after Katrina, because that's what the government in New Orleans tried to do after Katrina. They said that when the hurricane came through, that they tried to restrict the right to keep and bear arms when that was when people needed it the most, because there were people going around looting and committing property crimes, crimes against the person, all sorts of crimes, and that's when people needed the right to self-defense and the right to keep and bear arms by extension. And so lots of states, including Indiana, passed laws to prevent those sorts of things from happening in their respective states.
I know South Dakota has such a law, and I do recall lately Alaska just, and you would think of any state that doesn't need this law, it would be Alaska, but Alaska just passed it, and the governor signed it not that long ago.
One thing I'd like to mention, Paul, if it's okay, I encourage everybody, I've got a pocket constitution here that we keep on the desk, especially for episodes when my father is on with me, Mike, and he read this quote the other day. I'd like to read it today as well because I think it's applicable today. It's a quote from Daniel Webster. It says, "It is hardly too strong to say that the Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men in all ages who mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be kind masters, but they mean to be masters. They think there need be but little restraint upon themselves, the love of power may sink too deep in their own hearts. And that's exactly what's going on here with the governor of New Mexico. The love of power has gone too far into her own heart.
Absolutely. We got, and we're look, I got to move on, guys, because we've got 2 more stories to cover. We've gone over a third of our show already. And I think this one may take up just as much or maybe even more time. And Alex, you and I talked about this for 30 minutes yesterday, so we've got to make it stick in under 20 today. ATF's proposed rulemaking. It was published in the Federal Register Friday, which means we have 90 days from Friday to make public comment. Whether that comment does any good or not, yeah, that's left to be seen. But they want to make it so that if you want to sell a firearm, you must get an FFL or sell your firearm to an FFL. They want to end the private sales of guns, period. I may be oversimplifying there, but that's really close to what they want to do. And Alex, you and I covered this a lot yesterday. Is there anything that you've thought of since we went off the air that we maybe should have covered that we didn't?
No, I think we covered most of it yesterday, but and I think you've summarized it well there. But not only are they trying to end private sales or have a chilling effect on private sales, they are trying to create universal background checks and, by extension, universal registration, because that's what they need in the daisy chain to get to confiscation, is universal registration. And if they can make every private transaction of a firearm, every private transfer of a firearm go through a background check and an FFL, they can easily build that into a universal background check and a universal registration. So that's the evil with this. Obviously, there are problems with the separation of powers, which we got into a little bit yesterday. The ATF and their rulemaking authority, they've just gone far beyond their authority in changing the law and interpreting the law. This is a 108-page proposed rule, and there was one substitution in the actual law that was made by the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. The law was changed from the language, it struck this language with the principal objective of livelihood and profit, and it inserted to predominantly earn a profit. So if you're selling firearms with the intention or purpose of predominantly earning a profit, you could be caught up in this new rule proposed by the ATF. And of course, their 108-page document doesn't clarify much about what that means. So there's really a lot of tyranny in the ambiguity going on here, and that's the chilling effect that's going on.
Absolutely. Rob, I'm gonna go to you next. This whole mess of the ATF. Of course, we all need to comment on it. There's public comment period going on right now. What's your thoughts on the whole darn thing, man?
Well, this is extremely timely. If the ATF wanted to step on its own political foot and make a huge faceplant in front of the court, they could not have really chosen a better time or place. There are cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court pending right now. They reference something called Chevron deference. What that means is, because so many government agencies have taken so much upon themselves, Congress basically said, go do good. And then each administration under executive authority gets to define what its version of good is. The judges said, wait a minute. No, we have to tell ordinary citizens they need to know what the law says. That's our job, not yours as a government agency. So you need to stay within the letter of the laws passed by Congress. And none of these usurpations are covered by black letter law. So this simply adds to the ripeness of the cases in front of the court. Now, Paul, I think you should talk to these two lawyers, because this is so much. I'm an engineer. Greg, straighten me out.
No, you said it correctly, and it's. I'm surprised, first of all, that when they called it the Community Safer Communities Act. So we're guaranteeing this will do better. Now remember, this was passed during the hysteria over the Uvalde massacre. And the cause of the Uvalde massacre was, one, they did not have any armed, trained people protecting the school. All right? That's a very easy thing to do. You can get your teachers, trained for free to carry in your state by Faster Incorporated. Now, the other thing was that every police officer in Uvalde wet their pants and refused to act. Now, but remember that one of our basic arguments for gun possession is that from time immemorial, the law in all states and the federal law, the Supreme Court reaffirmed this in 2005, is that the police have no duty to protect any particular individual in the public. All right? So they can't be sued. Now, the other thing is that when they passed this Safer Community Act, I'm surprised they didn't add for the children, to get some people's sympathy. But the point that I want to make is how ridiculous how Biden and the ATF think. They say, "All right, we're gonna do this," and who's it going to affect? Will it affect one gangbanger? Will it affect one terrorist? Will it affect one mass murderer? No, it will not. They will find a way to obtain the weapons they need, and if they can't get guns, well, you can make bombs pretty easily. And so they're not addressing the problem. This goes back to what I said before. As soon as you say we've got to do something, then you'll accept anything as legislation. And in this case, that's a good thing for the left, because anything goes means we will ignore the Constitution. Again, these like one of the things that Alex pointed out is the idea of the making any profit. All right. Now, if they pass this rule, what's going to happen? Well, guns will be less available. And basic economics tell us when supply is low and demand is high. And we know demand is high because ever since the Obama administration, the gun makers have been selling all that they can make, and the ammo makers as well. So what happens here when suddenly this happens? Well, automatically the price will rise. Now, if the price rises, if I have a gun, and I do, that I bought for $250 in 1991, that right now I can go to the cheapest gun shop in town, and that gun is worth $1,200. What's going to happen? It might go to $2,000. It might go to $2,500. Now, I'm going to say, golly, this would be a good time to sell that gun and make a profit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're about to be arrested, you see. So it only goes against the sense of no one that the bill is aimed at is going to be affected, but that you're going to create an even bigger market. Now, what does that mean? Well, then if drug cartels can get drugs in from Mexico, they can get guns in from Mexico. And organized crime will have a field day with the raised prices.
They absolutely, it will create new cartels is what it'll do. It'll create new gun lords instead of drug lords.
And just before I finish, let me this book, Victor Davis Hanson, 2020, The Dying Citizen. Get this, read this. He has things about what destroys our sense of citizenship, and he quotes Honoré de Balzac, the French 19th century philosopher. The bureaucracy, the gigantic power set into motion by dwarfs, was thus born. And then Victor says this: yet the threats to citizenship outlined in the following 3 chapters, while no less real, are certainly more contrived and deliberate. The work of a professional and often ideologically driven elite. The first such danger is the effort of a near-permanent caste of unelected officials, regulators, and bureaucrats who hold enough gigantic power to usurp the citizens' control over their own government. And that's ATF is a bureaucracy. They're not a law enforcement agency, and they care about power and nothing else.
Absolutely. That speaks directly to Steve Dettelbach, who's now the director of ATF. And that was written 2 years before he took office. Let me get some comments in. Warsaw Patriot says, the way I see it, Paul, and I could be wrong, some people may see this calculated from the start when the FF rule came out. The other side, I see they are being desperate and they are losing. They are certainly desperate. And let's face it, that we've got 88 days, 87 days somewhere in there before public comment period closes and this thing becomes the official rule. And the lawsuits, I'll tell you right now, lawsuits are already drawn up. And more than just in the offices of the Second Amendment Foundation. I would expect Firearms Policy Coalition, if they don't file their own, will join us. I would expect GOA, if they don't file their own, will join us. There are multiple, NRA, again, the same thing. If they don't join us, they'll file their own. There are multiple lawsuits that are going to go after this. The ATF knows this. The ATF, I believe, expects to lose, but they're just throwing spaghetti in the wall to see if it sticks. Let's see here.
And
Paul,
okay. Let's yeah.
I'll go back to Rob's
Alex,
question
yeah.
about Chevron deference. I'd like to mention just real quickly, Rob, you mentioned it's this, and you summarized it well. It's this administrative law policy or doctrine where the courts show deference to these administrative agencies, which are subdivisions of the executive branch. But luckily, the court, I think, is going to curtail this deference toward these administrative agencies. They've taken up a case called Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, and I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court scales back this deference because, frankly, the courts have been far too deferential to these unelected bureaucrats and these executive agencies for far too long. And that goes exactly to the point that Greg was making as well, that we've basically handed over too much power to these unelected bureaucrats, and we've lost control of our own government.
Well, and we only need to look back about 3 years, and we can see that even with Trump at that time as the head of the government, as head of the executive branch of the government, a lot of the government wasn't exactly towing the line behind him. And it took all of 15 minutes after Biden took office for them to make a hard left turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My opinion, Trump's biggest mistake was he didn't clear out enough of the swamp. Whether he gets another chance or not, who knows? But that was Trump's biggest success is getting the Supreme Court to where it's at. His biggest failure is not clearing out enough of the swamp.
I would like to use the ATF as an example of how useless federal agencies are. My second year in law school, a gentleman who had been the director of ATF in northern Alabama. He went to the same church that I did, but the year before we came to Birmingham, he was kicked up to the national, and he was very concerned about where the ATF was going. And I got a chance to talk to him for a few minutes, and I said, like one thing, why don't they have another amnesty and register the machine guns? And he said, "Oh, Greg," he said, "now this is 1986." He said, "Did you know that there are so many illegal machine guns out there right now that if that it would take the entire manpower of the ATF simply to sit and fill out the forms until the year 2000, right? So that's how effective that they are."
Well, and
I wonder. Go ahead, please.
from 1986, I can't imagine that those machine guns would have rotted away now.
They probably had kids and multiplied.
Guys, I wonder this. When we see this absurd overreach by the ATF, are there some red state legislators who will say, we normally ask individuals to transfer firearms with a FFL, go to a gun store, a gun shop, transfer it, put it in the records, but we see the ATF illegally copying records. Maybe we should get rid of that law. You now can transfer firearms person to person. How much of a backlash do you think we'll see in red states?
I don't know for sure. I maybe at the state level, but the problem with these administrative agencies is they've kind of taken on a life of their own, and the problem is that there aren't enough Republicans often that want to curtail their power, because when Republicans are in power, they want to yield the power of these executive branches as well. So unfortunately, we don't have enough Republicans that are committed to limited government and to limiting these executive branch agencies. I think that tide is beginning to change and to shift, and I hope that enough legislators are willing to scale them back, because frankly, I can't think of a single alphabet soup agency that has done more good than harm. If somebody has one, let me know, but I can't think of one off the top of my head.
No. It is.
We get into a big question there, Alex, and I'm reading right now David Barton's original intent, and one of the problems that we have and that has allowed the federal government to expand is that beginning in the 1930s, the Supreme Court began incorporating the Bill of Rights from the feds to the states, and that has been used in order to impose criminal law and procedure and the federal rules on the states. And the entire idea of it is would have been completely rejected by the founders. They never intended the court to incorporate to make the states directly subject to the Bill of Rights as in the same manner as the federal government is. The states can go their own way. The most salient point is on the establishment clause of the Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. In other words, they cannot make a state-supported and endorsed church, but there was no such law in the limitations in the Constitution to the states. If they wanted to, the states could have an established church.
This this is a great point. And sorry, Paul, go ahead there if you had a comment. But I'd like to address this because it's a great point by Greg.
Go, because the comment's going to take us a left turn on us. So
Okay, excellent. Well, I think it's a great point because this doesn't come up often, but to question the incorporation doctrine, because I think it's a highly flawed doctrine, but even most conservatives haven't questioned it much in recent memory or recent history. But you're exactly right. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, were not intended to restrict state government actors. They were, the first 10 amendments were only intended to restrict federal government actors. And incorporation doctrine has acted, I think, like you suggest, Greg, as a basically a way for the government, the federal government, to insert itself into state politics and state governance. And unfortunately, I think that's made put the states in a weaker position with respect to their ability to govern themselves and to stand up to the federal government.
Yes.
let me go to that comment here, and then we got to move on to another topic. Riding shotgun with Charlie. If there truly are that many machine guns, it appears they are in regular use. I love that comment. I love that thinking. And of course, Charlie Cook is referring to the Heller decision where I believe it was Scalia that said you cannot ban firearms that are in common use. And that just, I never even thought of it.
Yeah, and what it says is that when a firearm is in common use, this is a handgun ban, and it becomes now burden of the state to say, oh yeah, that's a firearm ban, just like we always did 200 plus years ago. And now you get a bunch of lying historians who say, yeah, no, it doesn't work. Anyway, nice try.
All right. We do need to move on to our final topic today, and we've burned up, again, more time than I intended. We've got about 13 minutes left. Liberty Safes this week, I've been fond of saying they went Bud Light.
Yep.
They decided that there was, and I'm going to do a lot of paraphrasing here, there was a FBI asked them for a access to a safe of, and I'm trying to find.
Paul, I have their statement here. If you don't mind, I think it's useful to read that. Is that okay with you?
Do you have the first set or the second set of statements? Because I've got the second set I can put on screen.
I have the first.
Okay,
the
go.
Yep. It says, on August 30th, 2023, Liberty Safe was contacted by the FBI requesting the access code to the safe of an individual for whom they had a warrant to search their property. Our company protocol is to provide access codes to law enforcement if a warrant grants them access to a property. After receiving the request, we received proof of the valid warrant, and only then did we provide them with an access code. Liberty Safe had no knowledge of any of the details surrounding the investigation at the time. Liberty Safe is devoted to protecting the personal property and Second Amendment rights of our customers and has repeatedly denied requests for access codes without a warrant in the past. We do not give out combinations without proper legal documentation being provided by authorities. We regularly update our policies to ensure both compliance with federal and state law and reasonable consumer privacy protections within the law. First and foremost, Liberty Safe is committed to preserving our customers' rights, and we will remain unwavering in those values. So that was their statement after this search of a customer's home by the FBI. Apparently the FBI couldn't access the safe, so the FBI calls Liberty Safe and says, hey, we have a warrant for your customer's home, but we can't get in the safe. Can you help us out? And I'm paraphrasing this conversation. Obviously, I don't know what happened in that conversation exactly. But Liberty Safe maintains a database of master codes for safes that they sell, and they handed over the master code to their customer's safe. Of course, the problem with this is that the warrant was for their customer not for Liberty Safe. There was no warrant or subpoena for Liberty Safe to provide that access code, and they voluntarily gave it over anyway. And I think this is terrible. It looks awful for Liberty Safe. As you said, Paul, that they, I think, are going to get the Bud Light treatment here because, frankly, no matter what their statement says, they put the priorities of law enforcement above the rights of their customer.
I could not agree more. Let me get. They did attempt the next day to clarify and go and try and get their customer base back. I got 3 screenshots from Twitter that are their follow-up the following day. First one here, at Liberty Safe, we are dedicated to safeguarding the rights and privacy of all of our customers. It is a promise that remains deeply personal to our employees and leadership. Our company, one of America's oldest and largest safe manufacturers, was founded on the belief that Americans should have the fundamental right to protect and safeguard their valuables and property. As a courtesy to our customers, Liberty Safe has long adhered to industry standards by maintaining a secure database of factory set combinations. This practice helps customers regain access to their safe for a wide range of reasons, including loss of the original combination, service requests, and warranty issues. Liberty Safe processes over 4,000 requests of this type annually and provides combinations to safe owners only once they provide clear documentation of their identity and their ownership of the safe. It's continued on page 2. Page 2 says, we listen to our customers and update our products and practices in response to their evolving needs. Today, we are announcing a change that empowers our customers with greater control over their information, effective immediately, and that's in bold. Existing customers can visit www.libertysafe.com/pages/combination-removal and fill out the form to have records of their access codes expunged. In the coming weeks, we will be releasing a feature that gives every new customer this option when registering their safe. And I'm going to stop there. I'm going to put briefly, because people can read with their eyes faster than I can with my mouth. I'm going to go ahead and put the third page up for just a few seconds here. But, guys, I'm going to say, from my opinion, that should have been from the very get-go Liberty Safe's way to do business is, if you don't want us to keep the combination, we will default not keep the combination. I think they should have gone farther. I think it actually should have been, you can opt in so that we will keep a backup to get into your safe.
Wait a minute. We have some lawyers here, and I think you guys need to dumb this down for us civilians. When someone issues a warrant, they say, you law enforcement agency are able to look at this location during times of this period for information of this type. If they expressly state that you can open and inventory or seize the contents of a safe, go forth. The warrant, I suspect, never said that. And therefore, why did Liberty Safe turn over the combination? Gentlemen, am I understanding the real bone of contention here?
You want to jump in, Greg, or you want? I'm happy to.
No, you're the defense lawyer currently practicing. You're the well, I'll hand the ball to you.
Yes. So you're basically correct there, Rob. If the warrant describes the place and the things that are to be searched and searched for, then obviously that can be challenged. Generally, it's challenged later in court, as in a suppression. So if the police get a warrant to search somebody's home, including their safe, they can execute that warrant. And if any incriminating evidence is discovered and it turns out that that warrant was unconstitutional or invalid for some reason, then any of the evidence they may have found could be suppressed. But here the issue is that the warrant was for the customer's property, and Liberty Safe had no legal obligation at all to provide the access code. Ordinarily, a company should require a subpoena ducis tecum, which is a request or an order to produce documents or information before they turn over information about a customer. And even if they receive a subpoena, they should give notice to their customer so that their customer can challenge the subpoena and have an opportunity to file what's called a motion to quash the subpoena, which is to say that it's invalid and that the information being sought should not be turned over. So that would be the ordinary, reasonable, and prudent action to take. But here, Liberty Safe simply turned it over without any legal order obligating them to do so. So that's really the qualm here with Liberty Safe's actions.
Alex, is
Now, I would,
searching property so broad? I mean, that sounds unrestricted.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, after you, Greg.
Okay, it's kind of like this, Rob. If you're searching for a corpse in a house, you're only allowed to search for places where a corpse could be. So you're not looking in your office desk drawers. You're not looking in the toilet tank. You can only look in the places where it might reasonably be there. But like you said, if it says and the contents of the safe, okay, it's fine. But the Liberty Safe, and as Alex correctly said, they had no duty, and they have a right to, when the subpoena comes, they have a right to object to it, and they should note, and I'm sure in the rules of procedure of Indiana, they're like Alabama, there's 3 weeks to do that, and you should notify your customer so he can run out and buy a different safe if he has to and put his valuables in it. This whole thing is, look at the weasel language. While Paul was reading, I took some notes, and he says, first, Liberty says, we're dedicated to safeguard our customers' rights, okay, except when we don't, all right? That if you're dedicated, then you would have had a procedure in place that when this happens. The second thing is that we comply with all industry standards. Okay, this is the hide the ball thing where you go, oh, well, everybody in industry does that. What's that got to do with the legal standing of your client and his rights? You're just saying, oh, Mom, everybody does it, And then the last thing that really ticked me off was we protect our customers' most valuable, our most important valuables is what it said. The Fourth Amendment says we protect that. I value the Fourth Amendment more than my safe. All right. Because if that right is gone, I might as well not have a safe, because the government can walk in, as they did with the British with the warrants of assistance. They can walk into anybody's house and say, okay, we're going to look through this, open it up, or we're going to open it up for you. And the conclusion is this: all this weasel language in this press release, to me, says this: we fear the FBI more than we respect our customers' rights.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Their safe may withstand 1,200 degree fire for 120 minutes, may be made of 7-gauge steel, may have pins that can't be drilled out, but the contents of the safe are just one call away for the FBI, and that's not satisfactory for the customers.
Yes.
Well, and when I talked about this, go, Rob.
I looked on Thomas Register. There are lots of U.S. gun safe manufacturers. I suggest you do the same. Paul?
When I talked about this, I believe it was on Thursday I talked about this story. And one of the comments I got at that time was, look, if the FBI wants in, they're going to get in. And then that is true. I mean, look, they make chop saws. They make plasma torches. The thing is, are they going to get in without destroying what's inside? And that is, if I've got a safe, I want, if you want in that badly, I want what's inside to be useless to you. And so, yeah, that if you're gonna go back to the 1970s movies, if you're gonna get 6 sticks of dynamite, drill a hole, stick them in there, and blow the safe, I want nothing in there to be of use to you. So, yeah, that's this whole thing. And let me get.
I want to see
one thing I'd like to mention to address Rob's question earlier too about the scope of the warrant. The Fourth Amendment says no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. And so they have to, as Greg was explaining, they have to describe the place to be searched and the things to be seized, particularly to be in compliance with the Constitution. But generally, if they violate that constitutional order or mandate, that's challenged after the fact through a suppression hearing. And I don't know that that's an issue in this case. I don't think there's any information publicly available about what the scope of that warrant was.
I haven't seen any, and this goes back to, and I'm going to read right off of Bearing Arms, Rajit Singh's original story on this. Last week, an Arkansas man was arrested in connection with the U.S. Capitol riot on January 6th, 2021. Nathan Hurl Hughes has 4 charges pending against him, including a felony court count of interfering with police during a civil disorder. I can't imagine what we're expecting to find inside that safe that connects to those charges. And I'm not an attorney, so the two on the right side of your screen can speak to that better. But this seems to me maybe to be a fishing expedition. They just wanted to see what was inside the safe.
It's hard to say. We could really only speculate about that. Greg, do you have any ideas?
No, without facts, see, that's one of the problems with the law. The facts determine the applicable law, so it's hard unless you have all the facts. Maybe this gentleman's defense attorney will make the warrant public or something like that. But it's to me, the problem here is that if I have $10,000 in a savings account in Citizens Trust Bank, let's say, and all of a sudden I'm suspected of drug activity, the FBI comes with a warrant that says they want to look at my business records, and they say, hey, he's got $10,000 in this bank, and they just simply call the bank and say, hey, we've got a warrant to search his home, and we've got his account number. Can you just turn all the money over to us? You see? If this is allowed to fly, then basically anything that we have held, it's not just for our personal property, anything held in fiduciary trust is going to be open season.
Well, and do not get me started on civil forfeiture, because that, wow, we've got another hour show we could delve into there, and we're already over time here. So I'm going to start with Alex. Alex, if you would, we've got to start shutting this down. Alex, would you please plug Forge of Freedom and anything else you want to promote today, man?
Yeah, so I started the Forge of Freedom podcast at the beginning of the year. We have 58 episodes now. I release an episode on Fridays related to more broadly freedom-related topics, and on Mondays I have an episode generally with my father, Mike Ooley, who's also an attorney and a firearms instructor. We call it Monday Gun Day, and we talk about a firearms-related topic. So check that out. It's available on YouTube, on Rumble, by video, and then also on most of the popular podcast streaming platforms. But the idea behind it is that people are essential to the existence of freedom and to human flourishing, and that our freedom doesn't come from government, it comes from the voluntary interaction of individuals, and liberty can only exist and continue to exist as long as it lives on in the hearts and minds of the people. And that's what we want to promote. We want to promote the ideas of freedom, of liberty, so that liberty can carry on for generations to come.
All right, Rob, slow facts, self-defense gun stories, anything else you want to plug, bud?
I had a minute. I wrote an article this morning on slow facts. You are safe at home and at school. Facts and emotions in a nonviolent world. 2,100 other of its friends are waiting there for you. You might find something that interests you. Thank you, Paul.
Yes, sir. Greg, and I got to get this, and I'm going to put me on camera here. You got to plug this thing, man. A Time to Kill, and this. I got to say, I'm proud to say I've got a signed copy here. But
I changed the subtitle in 2019 to "The Bible and Self-Defense" to make it clearer to people what I was talking about. But it shows that we have a duty from God to defend the innocent, and He blesses us for doing so. And I demonstrate that the Genesis through Revelation, and it talks about the hard questions, turn the other cheek, live by the sword, die by the sword. It has 3 chapters on Jesus in the military. He never told anyone to quit the army. And it also has 3 chapters on the Bible and the death penalty. I hope it helps people with PTSD. If you know someone who has that, it might help them to know that God knows the difference between murder and killing in combat, self-defense, or law enforcement. So it's available on Amazon, A Time to Kill, the Bible, and Self-Defense. I taught Bible for 40 years, and now I've been a lawyer for 34. So I taught Bible longer than I taught law.
All right. All right. On my end, folks, that does wrap up my broadcasting week here. And please do come join us Monday night for the Polite Society podcast, 7 p.m. Central Time. And all next week, I'll have regular editions of The Bullet. After that, we're going dark. I've got to pack everything up, get down to Phoenix for Gun Rights Policy Conference and AmCon. So all of the following week, I will be either on my way to or in Phoenix, as well as probably Monday and Tuesday after that, I'll be on my way back. So about a week and a half, this show is going to go dark. Please do come join me all of next week, though. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for commenting. And podcast listeners, of course, thank you for listening. Please do consider joining us live some Saturday night, 7 p.m. Central Time, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, anywhere you can get your video content. Thanks, everybody, again, and we'll see you.